Module 5 of our Deeper into Typing seminar series. And this module, we will be typing the head types, types 5, 6, and 7. So, okay, we will begin. Okay. Now we're going to move on to talk about sixes. So the six we refer to as the loyal skeptic, the buddy, or the anxious preparer, and we talked about this in week 1. What I wanted to kind of come back here and re-highlight was the core fears of danger, fear itself, cowardice, being alone, and submitting to authority. So a lot of sixes, the fear of being alone, it does not mean they're afraid of being alone, like at home alone. I mean, obviously there are sixes that live by themselves or whatever. But the fear of being alone is literally a fear of being alone, like that no one will be there to support you or help you, or that you can bounce ideas off of, or that you can turn to for support, that there's no one there, that you're completely alone in it, and you'll have to figure everything out by yourself always. So when we talk about the fear of being alone, that's what we're talking about. The fear of submitting to an authority is interesting because the six simultaneously wants the authority, and they need to kind of have someone or something they can refer to bounce things off of. You know, does this sound good? How does this sound to you? How do you feel about this? Or what do you think I should do about this? But they don't want to submit completely to it, because submitting completely to it means losing the autonomy, and the six is aware of their tendency to sort of give their power over to something else or someone else. And because of that fear, the six will find themselves dancing in between asking for help and asking for assistance, but not really wanting it because I don't want someone else to get complete control over. So that's where the ambivalence you get from. There's a fear of submitting their will completely to someone else. And by doing that, that's why people experience the six as ambivalent. It's sort of like, well, you asked me what I thought about it, or you asked me my opinion, and then I gave it to you, and you reacted against me. But that's because the six is like, well, I don't want you to take over. I don't want to feel like I'm giving everything over to you. And so because of that, internally, the six may feel like there's often a talks, sixes will talk about feeling like a child. Um, Actually, what's interesting is people will experience the six like a child. And the six doesn't recognize that they're giving their authority to someone else like a child. And so when you say to them, oh, you're acting like a child, or you seem, you know, they're giving themselves a one down position, they're often horrified because that's not how they experience it. They just want to know that they're being supported, that somebody else is, you know, has their back, so to speak. And so it can be an interesting reality check for sixes to recognize the ways in which they're making themselves smaller in comparison to. So the six is another type that sees themselves as smaller in comparison to everyone else or to someone else because other people are, you know, the mean authority, or they're going to get them in trouble, or they're going to, you know, abuse them in some way. And so the six kind of feels like the scrappy little dog that's not going to let somebody else do that. And so, but they're smaller in comparison. So if they visualize themselves and the other person, they often see themselves as smaller, even if they're a very large person. They'll see themselves as smaller than the person that they see as having more of the power. So the six never feels like they have the power, and they want it, but they're uncomfortable with it. So the uncertainty is about really trusting their own intuition, and that's really the journey of the six. And when we talk about sixes in more detail in other classes and seminars, we talk a lot about that, needing to find certainty in their own choices, in their own decisions. Now, some sixes have said, it's not that I'm not certain of myself, I just need, you know, I want to just make sure that I'm not crazy. So it's sort of just checking to make sure, you know, they're not completely insane, or checking reality. And if it's not mirrored back to them the way that they see it, then it causes that kind of anxiety that we talk about. There's sort of that chaos fear that can come up.
Yeah, Alexandra was pointing out that a lot of descriptions that people have now of sixes emphasize, you know, like the corporate six that stays in the same company for years and doesn't really question anything. And that's actually something that a lot of sixes don't really relate to. And really, that's more nine-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, a lot of descriptions of six I feel are written by people that aren't sixes. and so they don't really understand, and it is complicated, and it is hard to explain the type in the same amount of time as the others because there are so many different variations, and we're all so different. But I think it's important for people to understand that it isn't, six isn't just about like this little scared person that doesn't know what's going on, and so they have to ask everyone and they just do what everyone says, and that makes them feel more comfortable.
Right.
It is like you said, sometimes it feels like you have the certainty, but you want to check yourself against someone else to make sure you're living in reality.
Yeah.
So it's not that I don't know what I want to do. I know what I want to do. I just need to make sure I'm not, insane.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, because the six got a lot of feedback when they were younger, oh, you're crazy, or why are you reacting so much? And so it undermines their sense of certainty. And so that's what the six has got to sort of relearn, is that um, is keeping and holding that state of certainty, because there was a lot of feedback probably when they were younger, or you're reacting too much, or you're crazy, or why are you responding like that? And so the six learns, well, my reactions and my thought process must be way off. So I better check to make sure that that's okay, or that I'm reacting the right way. And that's where the kind of the uncertainty and the undermining can become a problem for the six. I have that warrior archetype overlaying it. So the six with a five wing will be more cerebral. If you'll notice, that's Daffy Duck back there. If you remember Daffy in the cartoons, he was really anxious and reactive. So I just put him back there because I thought it was funny. The six with a five wing will be more cerebral, detached, and less emotionally reactive. So they tend to be a little more head-centered. The reactions don't come out as quickly. Because you have that five wing, it's more internal, so they pull in more. They tend to have a darker presentation. They may be a little bit more sardonic and cynical, provocative, saying things that you maybe don't say. They may have a little less social awareness, but they're still tracking what's dangerous. They're still tracking what's dangerous, what needs to be tended to, and they're also tracking the group. Now, all sixes track the group in a way, not in the social subtype way, but they all pay attention, even if they have five wings, to what other people are doing. Because the six, remember, doesn't want to stick out so much, because if you stick out too much, then you're going to get targeted. So it's not like social subtype, I have to do what everyone else is doing and be friends with everyone else and that kind of thing. Although it can manifest that way, particularly like a social six with a seven wing, they're really going to be tracking the group and tracking what other people are doing and what are they wearing and what's the new thing that we're saying and are we into this, and because it's the group, it's about the group. That's social subtype. But all sixes want to know what people are doing, and they're going to have a little bit of awareness about the pulse of what's going on. Now, they may be very critical of it and provocative about it and rebellious, but they still know, because if you've stepped too far out the boundaries, then like I said, you can get targeted, and that's dangerous. So you don't want to go out and be wearing, a weird, striped top hat when everybody else is wearing, a bowler.
Unless it's a joke.
Unless it's a joke, right? Unless they're being silly. Because people might look at you and be like, what is that? And then you're going to get targeted, and then it's embarrassing, and then that whole thing, that's just a nightmare for a six. So that's what I mean by tracking the group. So sixes with seven wings will be lighter. They tend to be more colorful, more energetic. So the six with the five wing can be very kind of they tend to be express more of the lethargy that we were talking about, where they have a harder time getting things moving. They want to investigate things for a little bit longer. That five wing comes in. The six with the seven wing has the impulsiveness of the seven, so they're going to go out. Let's just try it, figure it out, trial by error, and then and if that doesn't work, okay, well then we'll try something else. So they tend to be a little more reactive because of that. So if the reaction comes up, they're more likely to express it. That seven wing kind of adds that impulsivity where they might just say something. It might be harder for them to pull back the reaction. They tend to be more spontaneous and gregarious, so they're a little bit more kind of outgoing and friendly, and they want to go out and have fun and try new things. And so the seven wing can really influence, particularly depending on how strong it is, really influence how the six displays itself. But again, you have to go back to if the personality, the main ego structure is to maintain safety and to, you know, thwart unforeseen danger, you're dealing with 6, not 7. Both subtypes will display anxiety in their microexpressions, like I mentioned. So you'll see it with the 6 with the 5 and the 6 with the 7 wing. The anxiety will display. You'll see the fear. They will challenge authority in different ways. So they can do it directly, where they'll say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's not right." You know, but it's usually can take a little while before they'll do that because they got to test to see how safe it'll be to do that. Or they'll do it passive aggressively, where they'll sort of do little kind of undermining things if they can, if to take down what they see as an unfair authority. They may start tracking um, the inconsistencies. All 6s track inconsistencies. So but for example, if they work for a particularly unfair boss, they may start writing down all the things they do that are violations of things, and start paying really close attention to ways in which they're inconsistent and building a case. That's very 6y. They're building a case. It's sort of your archetypal attorney kind of thing, or private investigator, where they're gathering the information like a 5 would, but they're gathering it in order to take down what they consider to be an unfair authority or something of that nature, so that they can regain a sense of personal power. So that's all very 6y. 6s with 5 wings will typically be the scholar, artisan, or warrior archetype. And the 6 with 7, you'll get more sage. All 6s have the warrior a lot, or the artisan. Some 6s with 7s will also have the priest archetype. Sexual 6 is either more seductive and gender conforming, or explosive and 8ish. So you can get two manifestations of the sexual 6, where they can be very seductive and kind of ultra feminine or ultra masculine, and then alternately, all of a sudden they'll become very kind of explosive and 8ish and aggressive. And so that you'll see that with sexual 6. Social 6 is more friendly. They can also be more 1ish. All social subtypes will seem more 1ish because it's about the rules and the norms of society, and this is what you do and you don't. Just they'll all identify with 1 a little bit, even if they don't have 1. Or 2ish, they'll be more friendly, more helpful, more accommodating. The social 6 will kind of can identify with 9 more, because will do what the group is doing if it makes everyone else comfortable, even if it makes them anxious. They'll try and do it. That just kind of depends. And then the self-pres 6 is more insular, so they're more reserved, less visibly anxious, and more stoic. So I mentioned before that self-pres is going to seem 5ish in any type, because they're pulling in. Or self-pres and 6 together can seem even ultra 6y, because they can also be very anxious and sort of like, oh my God, did I check the door? Is it really locked? Or, did I pay the insurance this month? Or do we have enough money? And, all of those self-pres anxieties will sort of amplify the anxiety of the 6 and make them seem very anxious. You may or may not see it. Some self-pres 6s will seem really anxious, and you can see it with them all the time, and some you can't see it at all, but there's a lot of internal kind of anxiety happening. So it's that insular quality of the self-pres subtype.